So was Iran involved with a recent assassination attempt in Cyprus? And either way, what else has the Islamic regime been doing as nuclear talks in Vienna continue to stall? Here with the analysis, former senior advisor for global public affairs at the United States State Department and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Digital Strategy, Len Khodorkovsky. Len, thanks so much for being with us. Now, let's start in Cyprus. Cypriot officials say that Iran had nothing to do with it. Israel flip-flopping on whether Iran is involved and whether Teddy Sagi was even a target. Stand with us now, the latest to implicate Iran. What do you say, and what evidence do you have to support that?
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. In terms of the evidence, I certainly don't have any evidence at this point, but I did note that the Prime Minister's office has pointed to Iran as the Iranian regime has tried to execute a terrorist attack on Israeli businessmen. That would not shock me in the very least. Iran has planned and executed attacks all over the world for the last 42 years. It has assassinated world leaders. 2 of its assassins were imprisoned last year in Europe for trying to kill for trying to actually blow up an event from Iranian dissidents. There was also a story earlier this year where the Iranian regime tried to kidnap and extradite an Iranian citizen, an American citizen to Iran. Mm-hmm. So that, if it smells like the regime, if it looks like the regime, in my mind, it's the regime, and that would be my default position.
But isn't it possible? I mean, and why shouldn't we necessarily defer to the judgment of the Cypriot police and Cypriot officials? Isn't it just as possible or plausible that financial or corporate disputes were the catalyst, as earlier suggested?
Certainly, everything's plausible, and we'll have to let the investigation take its course. But this is the MO of the Iranian regime. This is how they operate. They are like a mafia state that tries to intimidate and bully people and dissidents. And this is its way of sending a message. It has very limited number of tools in its toolbox to try and send messages to Israel and the United States, and this is one of them. So I certainly, let's let the investigation play itself out, but I would put the onus on the regime to disprove it rather than give it the benefit of the doubt that it's innocent.
All right, now let's move on to nuclear talks. Iran is now asking for yet another precondition to resume negotiations with the West. They want the United States to unfreeze some $10 billion in assets as a show of goodwill. Germany, for one, rejecting the demand. Is Iran at all serious about these nuclear talks, or are they just maybe trying to get as much as possible before letting them fail?
Well, I think it's both. I think, number one, it is desperate for money. It has been desperate for cash since the beginning of the Biden administration, and going back to the maximum pressure campaign of the Trump administration, which essentially starved the regime of about $200 billion, and that's according to the former president, Rouhani. So yes, the regime wants cash. It's trying to escalate its nuclear program in order to get access to any money it can, because that is the only way it can survive. It has no legitimacy among its people, and any legitimacy that it has in the world stage is what we allow it to have. And so I think the Biden administration has been fairly meek on this issue and has allowed Iran to be rewarded for escalating its nuclear ambitions.
So do you think the Biden administration might actually...
Why would the regime, soften its position?
So do you think the Biden administration might actually cave on this? Do you think that Biden might actually free up that $10 billion?
I would not be shocked because I think the Biden administration is more desperate for a deal than the Iranian regime. I think that the Biden administration, especially in view of the Afghanistan debacle, is looking for a diplomatic win. I think it sees a new Iran deal as perhaps that diplomatic win. Of course, they see it as a win. I don't think anyone else does, but I do see a possibility, whether it's literally unfreezing the funds or whether it's allowing the funds to come to the regime from increased sales to China and other players like Venezuela and Syria. I could see it happening. It's definitely plausible.
Len Khodorkovsky, thank you so much for being with us again today.
Thanks so much.